Hello and welcome back to episode 5, I want to say. I can't be losing count this early on, but yeah, episode 5 of Charlie.inkspired. I swear to God, the minute I ever start recording, the noisiest cars are just outside. I have to say, I live in a flat and I live in the middle, so you can literally hear things that are going on above me, things that are going on below me, and my mic picks them up, like their footsteps. When the dogs upstairs are barking, everything. It's so frustrating to try and find a good time of the day to do that. So I do Friday afternoons. People are either out or they're going out or they're just indoors. So I try my best. I also don't live alone. I live with my partner and he's a gamer, so he's often playing games, and you can often pick up when he's playing with his friends and just chatting all the time. So I do my best to try and pause when I'm speaking, to let cars pass and things like that. It ends up taking me twice as long to record just because I'm like pausing for a minute and then I have like 2 minutes of blank footage with nothing to do, nothing to say. I'm just waiting for a car to pass. So I'm going to try and just crack on because realistically, I don't think you guys care that much whether you can hear a car ever so faintly in the background. I've kind of switched up my setup a little bit, so I've brought everything a lot closer. The mic is a lot closer and I've turned the input way down, so hopefully that'll stop picking up things around me. You can probably hear everything going on inside my body right now, which is probably less ideal for you. I've also brought the camera closer, it just feels a bit more intimate. I felt like you could see a lot of my bed in my bedroom in the previous videos, so maybe that's a bit weird when you're talking about like murder and stuff. You can see the tapestry behind me now, and now that you're up close you can see how absolutely shredded it is by my cat. And if you want to know a secret behind here, I don't know if you're going to pick that up on camera, but I can see it. There are literal gouges out the wall from where my cat, Ramen, I have two, but only one of them likes to be a little shit, frankly. He loves to scale it while I'm sleeping and he just scratches out the wall, so I'm going to have to fill that out whenever I come to move. But yeah, there's a little catch up that you didn't ask for. How has your week been? I have had a nice chill week. I purposely booked some time off for work just to fucking chill because life's been a lot lately. I also watched the new Netflix show One Day. If you haven't read the book, I urge you to read the book first. I read the book in college nearly 10 years ago and it absolutely destroyed me then. The film isn't that great. It's got Anne Hathaway in it. I normally love Anne Hathaway, but not her best work, I don't think. Not the best. It just wasn't well directed, I think, is probably the best way to put it. But the Netflix show, I knew it was coming, but it destroys me every single time. And it's made me want to reread the book because it was one of those books that, it's one of those books that just makes you fall in love with reading, makes you fall in love with storytelling. And yeah, so I thought it was worth talking about, but there you go. Today we are covering one of the most complex cases I have ever even attempted to cover. And it takes us across multiple countries. And I'm going to say this now before I even say the disclaimer. There are going to be names in this case that I will pronounce wrong. I have tried my best to research how to say it, but I am dyslexic, okay? So I really struggle with pronouncing words that I haven't rehearsed a million times over in my head. So yeah, I apologize in advance if I offend anyone for mispronouncing names that are foreign to me. I will try harder and do my best to get better, but I'm human. So yes, this case takes us across multiple countries, multiple suspects, multiple victims. So buckle up, it's gonna get complicated. But I will say, as dark as the murders are in this case, we don't go into too much depth. So it's kind of a bit of a wacky story type case today, rather than an in-depth, heavy details kind of case. So it might be a bit lighter, I don't know, we'll try. So before we get into that, I need to say my usual disclaimer, alongside, the already mentioned, I can't pronounce words for shit. I mean no harm nor disrespect to the victims or families involved in today's case. These episodes are researched by myself and myself only, with the information that is already available online. Across these episodes, I do like to put in my opinion. Please remember that it is my opinion and my opinion alone. And as you are entitled to yours, I am also entitled to mine. And lastly, today's episode does cover topics of violence and murder, so if you're not in headspace for that right now, please pause here and go away, frankly. Come back when you are feeling like you're in a better place to hear it. So with all that being said, let's take a breath and begin. Today our case is going to start in Heilbronn in Germany, the 6th largest city in the state. And picture this, it's a sunny afternoon on the 25th of April 2007. Officer Martin Arnold and Michelle Keitzvetter were on their lunch break in their patrol car. Michelle was 22 years old at the time and sat in the driver's seat, and the windows were rolled down to let some fresh air in. But this picturesque lunch break didn't last long, as both officers were very suddenly shot in the head. With their bodies slumped over and the windows down, whoever was responsible for this leaned into the car, ripped their guns out of the holsters in the process, and stole 3 magazines. By the time the ambulance crew arrived, both officers were lying on the ground outside of the car. Michelle was sadly pronounced dead on arrival, but Martin was miraculously alive. But it goes without saying he was very seriously injured after being shot in the head. He was taken to hospital and put into an induced coma. And eventually when Martin woke up from this coma, his memory was a little blurry, understandably so. The last thing he remembered, he was on his lunch break with his partner Michelle, and all of a sudden he wakes up, she's dead, he's been in a coma for weeks, with a gunshot wound to the head. Wild. And as you can recall, this happened in the afternoon on the streets in broad daylight. Surely someone would have seen something, right? And police were able to speak to multiple reported seeing a man flee from the scene covered in blood. And police are thinking around, who in the area could do this, and there was actually a group of travellers who just joined the area who were parked up in a park nearby, so they initially focused on them. Every one of them had a solid alibi, so perhaps it wasn't them. And everywhere they looked ended up being a completely dead end. There was no evidence to support it. So back to square one with a very minimal description of a potential suspect, a victim not able to recall anything about the crime. They decide to focus on the car, where here they found that DNA had been left inside the car on the middle console. So they swabbed this and sent it off to a lab. And this was then sent off to the Institute of Forensic Medicine, where all they were able to determine was that this piece of DNA belonged to an Eastern European female, which, as you can imagine, completely stumped the officers. The only report of any suspect, or even close to that, was of a man. So what was this random woman's DNA doing in the middle console of the car? And granted, this is a police car, so there are a lot of people that do get in and out, but it just wasn't sitting right with the officers. So they compared this DNA to any other matches in their system, and whilst they couldn't connect a name to the piece of DNA, they did connect it to multiple other cases. And not just in Germany. These cases ranged from Austria to France and pretty much all over Europe. And the media went wild. Suddenly the stories of the woman without a face were hitting headlines all across Europe. So you may already have heard of this. So a lot of people dubbed it as the woman without a face, or alternatively, it was titled the Phantom of Heilbronn. Police even offered a €300,000 reward for anyone who had any information. So who was this mystery woman going around Europe committing loads of crimes? Well, this is where the story starts to get really complicated, so bear with me, I've tried to keep it as simple as possible. This mystery woman's DNA was first found on a teacup in 1993. This teacup had been found next to the dead body of a 62-year-old woman in her home. This took place in Germany, and she'd been strangled with garden wire. And that's a time difference of 14 years to the case that we were just talking about with Michelle. So what on earth? And this completely baffled officers. Was this a mass murderer going around for the last 14 years? Well, this was just the tip of the iceberg. The DNA was next found 8 years later in Germany, where a 61-year-old male had been murdered in his home with garden twine. And in this case, the DNA was found on a kitchen drawer. So at this point, police are like, okay, we've got 2 other murders from this woman. And these 2 murders seem to have a very obvious MO. They are both in Germany. They're both elderly people that were strangled in their home address, also with gardening equipment. And whilst these 2 seem like very obviously linked, what on earth did Michelle have to do with it? And in the early 2000s, this woman's DNA decided to pop up everywhere. In October 2001, the DNA appeared on a cookie after a caravan was broken into. What were they hoping to find in this caravan? I don't know. Money? Hidden gold? Treasure map? In my obviously expertise opinion when it comes to breaking into houses, I guess you could call it, that wouldn't be the first place I'd look, because frankly, you can't store a lot of valuables in a caravan, but then what do I know? I've never found anything valuable in my life, so maybe I'm missing a trick there. In October 2001, the DNA was found on a syringe that was left in a forest. and it was discovered by a little girl who stepped on it accidentally. So police are thinking, okay, we've got 2 murders, we've got a break-in where they seemingly didn't take anything but took a bite from a cookie, and now we have their DNA on a syringe that's being left in the woods. Putting things together, or I guess you could say clutching at straws, they thought maybe this woman is a heroin addict, and the only way to fund her addiction is to break into people's houses. Maybe those murders were money motivated. Stepping up from caravans in 2004, a French gemstone trader was robbed, where lo and behold, the Phantom's DNA was found again. In 2006, a home was broken into in Germany, where a rock was thrown through the window to gain access, and the Phantom's DNA was on this rock. But once again, no items were stolen from this house. And in March 2007 in Austria, an electronics shop was broken into, and then a year later an optician's. So now we're over in Austria as well. The police are thinking, what on earth is happening here? And these crimes are starting to get really erratic. They're not starting to make much sense. They don't really seem to link up with each other. And the locations don't make sense. Is this person travelling to different countries every time they commit a crime? Like, how can you go from breaking into a caravan and taking a bite of someone's cookie, which is a very serious crime, to all the way through to murder, and then robbing a jeweller's the next? Like, it's just doesn't make sense. And they're claiming that this woman did all this under the influence of heroin. So maybe that would explain the erratic nature of it. I don't know, but hindsight's a wonderful thing. So at this point in the case, police have been able to discover over 20 burglaries and thefts of cars and motorbikes linked to the Phantom. These all occurred between 2003 and 2007 in Germany alone. So police decided to run with this idea that it was a drug-fueled motive. This person, whoever they were trying to rob places for money, take cars for money, sell them on, all to fund their heroin addiction. So with that, the German police took DNA from over 3,000 homeless women or known drug users in the area, only to find 0 matches. I can't help but think, if you can put the time, money and effort into approaching all these homeless women and taking DNA from them, surely there's some sort of funding to help them get some shelter, maybe have a bed for the night. Just saying. And on the 30th of January 2008, the Phantom's DNA was found in a car that was used to transport 3 Georgian men's dead bodies. And these 3 men were murdered in Happenheim, but police did discover that in this particular case, the Phantom didn't work alone, as they found other people's DNA in connection to this, and they were able to link multiple other suspects to this particular case. So was the Phantom part of a bigger gang, an organisation, some European crime lord thing going on? These accomplices were arrested and taken in for questioning, where they were asked, who is the Phantom? Where did you meet her? How does she get you to do all this? But all these men just didn't have anything to say, didn't know what they were on about, or some of them just refused to say anything. And this wasn't the only case that police believed there were other accomplices helping out. Police were just astounded at how this female managed to work with men from all over the world and not get them to say a single thing. And she never worked with the same accomplice twice. So how on earth was this European woman getting men from all over Europe to commit these crimes and never reveal anything about her? Was this the start of something much bigger? And in 2008, some kids broke into a secondary school to smoke some weed. And the Phantom's DNA was found at this scene too. The kids were asked, who was this woman that was with you? What was she doing with you? And they were like, what are you on about? We just broke in to smoke some weed. In April 2008, a home was broken into where the victims were actually held hostage by gang members. And as they were held hostage, all their items, valuables and belongings were completely looted. And once again, the Phantom's DNA was found in this case too. So was she part of a gang? But nobody involved in this case could say anything about her either. So at this point in the case, the Phantom's DNA had been left in 6 crime scenes over 4 months. So police were starting to see a build-up, an increase in the frequency of these crimes that are being committed. So was the Phantom getting cocky? Or were they just simply being reckless? After all, at this point, they've been getting away with literal murder for over a decade. Maybe it's all gone to her head that, she's impossible to catch and she's just becoming careless. And in October 2008, the Phantom's DNA was linked to its 40th crime scene and 6th murder, as the body of a nurse was found dead in her car. And this murder didn't match the other MOs of the other murders that have occurred previously, so it just, again, seemed really erratic. And if that one wasn't weird, the next one is probably one of the weirdest ones. I'm just taking a quick pause here because Ramen wants to be involved. For those audio listeners only, my cat is now on the screen and fighting everything. Aren't you? He's got his claws in my leg. Ow. No, those are my headphones. Can't play with those. Just settle. Settle. So in 2005, there was a fight between two brothers where one brother shot the other brother. Seems like a case closed, no? But when they were taking DNA samples from the gun and the bullets, her DNA was found there. How? How is this a thing? And police all over Europe are baffled at this point. So German, Austrian and French police are starting to work together to frantically try and get this master criminal behind bars. And they're testing women's DNA all over Europe. Even in Belgium and Italy, they started just testing random women's DNA. They're checking CCTV images, but they can't find anything. Surely with a woman travelling all over Europe to commit these crimes, there'd be some trace of her on camera or street footage anywhere, but nothing. And it's important to remember that in all of these cases, there's never a footprint left behind, a hair, fibre, item of clothing, nothing. They just keep getting this match for DNA for this European woman pop up everywhere. And in multiple cases, witnesses have seen men fleeing from the scene. So was she disguising herself as a man? Was this how she was getting away with all of this? So at this point, the police have spent over 8 years, 16,000 hours and €2 million on trying to pinpoint who this phantom killer is. And in 2009, they actually increased the reward by €100,000, so there was a reward for €400,000 for any information on the phantom killer. They were getting really, really desperate because whoever this was really, really dangerous, and the media was going viral with this European mastermind that was taking over Europe and committing all these ridiculous crimes. And it was even dubbed the most serious serial killer criminal in European history. When in 2002, they so very nearly catch a break. A fire broke out in Germany and a male's body was found at the scene. And in an attempt to find out who this John Doe was, they actually found some asylum-seeking forms. This man had fled from France and wanted to settle in Germany. And on these forms were fingerprints. And from this form, police were actually able to lift trace amounts of DNA from the fingerprint. So they run this, and who pops up but a match other than the Phantom? But clearly the body they found was male, so how was this possible? Had she been filling out these forms for them? Does this explain why she was meeting so many European men? She was like, hey, I'll get you a place to live if you commit these crimes for me. Maybe that's how this was working. Or even crazier, was she pretending to be an asylum seeker herself? You're probably highly confused and suspicious at this point, and maybe even you've worked it out already. You wouldn't be the only one that's confused. I'm still confused, and I know what happens. The forensic team couldn't work out how this John Doe that was in the fire came up as a match, so they decided to run it again, where mysteriously, they weren't a match anymore. So yes, police were back to square one and thinking, oh God, where are we going to start now? But this particular point is where it all starts to unravel. If you're ahead of the game and you're a smart cookie, you're going to be thinking, surely there's some contamination issue going on here. And you would be right. The swabs that had been used to collect all of the DNA evidence throughout every single one of these cases had been contaminated. The company who made these were German Grainer Bio 1 Labs, and on the packaging line of this company were Eastern European women, individually packaging cotton swabs. So whilst yes, these swabs were individually wrapped and sterilised, the sterilisation process gets rid of bacteria, making them safe for medical use, but it doesn't get rid of trace amounts of DNA. Bio1 released a statement to say that their swabs were safe in medical use, but they should not be used for DNA evidence. Because of the sterilisation process they use, they never were safe to use for this. And surely that would have been listed somewhere on their website, on their what they present to their customers, right? Because each company has a different process depending on what the use is for. And yes, you'd be absolutely right, German police were cheaping out. And that's what caused this mass confusion. There never was a mysterious mastermind killer travelling Europe. And all these matches were coming from the swabs themselves. It is interesting though that in these cases where the DNA was taken, they took it from an area where they found DNA at the scene. At no point did they find like a mixed result, Like, if you were to find a piece of DNA on a cup, let's say, you swipe it, and even if the swab was contaminated, surely it should bring up 2 profiles. But it didn't. It only ever brought up this one profile of a worker in the lab. And I kind of love the idea that police are on this mad hunt for this killer, and this middle-aged Eastern European woman is just minding her own business, doing her job, packaging these swabs, with no idea that she's being linked to all of these. And as I mentioned, millions of pounds were poured into finding this phantom killer. So just think how embarrassing that is for the German police, and Austrian police, and French police, but mostly the Germans in this case. As a result of this, in 2009, Stefan of the Berlin Association Lawyers said this case just shows us the importance of not jumping to conclusion based off circumstantial DNA evidence. And he's right, it absolutely points out that judges can be completely blinded by DNA. Because yes, DNA can prove that that specific DNA was at that crime scene, but it doesn't tell us how it got there. And sometimes DNA can be just that, circumstantial. And because of this, frankly, royal fuck-up, a lot of these cases that we mentioned earlier are still unsolved. However, it did lead to a lot of new standards being put upon the police. From the ISO 18385 DNA Consumers Act, this ensured that these products were no longer contaminated to prevent this from ever happening again. And they also generated a database specifically for police from these factories of a list of all the workers that worked there, so that if, for any reason, these kept cropping up again, they could kind of cross them off and be like, oh, must be contaminated, that's a worker. And in 2017, Germany actually started making changes to their law around deeper investigation on genetic profiling, where basically they want to use really smart genealogical information to work out specifically where someone is from and work out the descents of the individual. As a result of this case, German police now only use swabs which have been sterilised with ethylene oxide, which does remove any biological matter or traces of DNA, making them safe for DNA testing. And since this case, people love to theorise a conspiracy theory. And you know, I love a good conspiracy theory myself. And the theory is that this woman is purposely putting her DNA on these samples so that she can go out and commit these crimes and just be like, oh, well, it's contaminated. Of course my DNA is going to be there. And as wild as that would be, I don't think that's the case. I think this woman is just completely innocent, minding her own business. So let's go back to where we all started today's case, with Michelle. Her partner, Officer Martin Arnold, was starting to gain some sort of recollection or memory of the incidents that happened that day. He remembered they were sat in the car when all of a sudden in the rearview mirror he spotted a man approach the window. He was middle-aged, had short sleeves, dark jeans and dark hair. And this man came to the passenger side of the car where Martin was sat. Then all of a sudden another man approached and came over to Michelle's side. He even recalled Michelle saying, ugh, can't get a moment's peace. And then they were shot in the head. Next thing he knows, it's all black and he's on the pavement and being rushed to hospital. So who was responsible for such a cold-hearted, random attack? And here is where the names are going to get slaughtered by my pronunciation, so I'm sorry, but I'm going to do my best. On the 4th of November 2011, 2 men named Hugh Bondhart and Hugh Mundlos were found dead by police. And this was deemed a double suicide. They were both shot dead. But the gun that was used to kill them, yep, this was Michelle's gun. The very same that was stolen off her cold dead body. Not only this, but a pair of joggers were found with Michelle's blood on it at their house, which being 4 years later is quite impressive. Did they not wash it? Was it that badly stained that they couldn't get it out? I don't know. So police actually have a suspect after, 4 years since Michelle passed. So who were these mystery men? Well, this is where it takes an even more interesting turn. These 2 men were none other than leaders of the neo-Nazi National Socialist Underground. We'll call them NSU for short. And it wasn't just these 2 men that were the leaders. They also had a female accomplice who was also a leader of the NSU. And her name was Beate Scheppe. And we don't know exactly why the NSU murdered Michelle. Some speculate that as an officer, she had some information on them that they really didn't want her to know. But the more we go on to find out about the NSU and the previous murders that they've committed, because spoiler alert, there's going to be a few that I'm about to announce to you, a lot of their crimes were very racially motivated. Shock, horror. So along with the DNA evidence of Michelle's blood on these pair of jogging bottoms, police recovered DVDs full of images of dead people that they'd killed, including Michelle. Not only this, but they also uncovered a hit list which had over 88 names in it. On this list included 2 prominent members that represented Islamic and Turkish groups. So here police uncover the series, I guess you could say, of the racially motivated murders conducted by the NSU, all occurring between the years 2000 and 2007 in Germany, leaving a total of 10 dead and 1 wounded. Their primary targets were Turkish people residing in Germany. However, also in their victim list was 1 Greek male and 1 German female, which we know to be Michelle. And they did seem to have an MO, if you can call shooting people at point blank range in broad daylight a master plan, I guess. But then again, I don't know why I'm surprised. I don't know what I expect from a neo-Nazi group post-millennium. Are they that smart? No, they're not. So now let's go through the murders that the NSU conducted. And again, I apologise for the pronunciation of these names. 38-year-old Turkish business owner Enver Simsek was murdered in September 2000. Abdurrahim Azadoglu was a mechanic who was shot twice in the head, who was discovered by a passerby who saw him through the window in June 2001. 31-year-old Solomon Tuskopru was shot in the head 3 times in his greengrocer shop in June 2001. 38-year-old Habil Kilik was also shot in his greengrocer's shop in August 2001. Mehmet Turgut was shot 3 times in the head in his kebab shop in February 2004. 50-year-old Ismail Yazar was shot 5 times in the head in his kebab shop in June 2005. Greek male Theodoros Bulgarides was murdered in his locksmith shop in June 2005. Mehmet Kubasik was shot in his kiosk shop in April 2006. Also in April 2006, their penultimate victim, Halit Yozgat, was shot in the head in his cafe, and their final victims were Martin Arnold and Michelle Keitzvetter. The radical group were absolutely driven by the thought of foreigners coming into their country and setting up businesses. But Michelle seems to stick out a bit. She was of German descent, and she was working as a police officer. It's not like she had a shop and she just looked foreign to them. I don't know. And I tried to find out more information on this, but there really isn't that much information to uncover there. So the 3 people we already know who are responsible for these were Yu Bondhart, born October 1st, 1977. Yu Mundlos, born the 11th of August, 1973. And Beate Japp, born 2nd of Jan, 1975. These 3 grew up in Jena, in Germany, where Beate met Mundlos at a local youth club when they were teenagers. And these 2 immediately began a romantic relationship. You could say they shared some common ground of racism. But in 1994, Beate then fell in love with Bonhard, who she met through Mundlos. I don't know whether these 3 were like a threesome thing. It seems more complex than, frankly, I care to dig into. And as the 1990s continued, the 3 ended up getting involved in the far-right neo-Nazi scene that was beginning to develop. I say beginning to develop. I guess reigniting is probably a better word. And they initially started engaging in like anti-fascist fights and groups. They started attending far-right concerts and even wore handmade SS uniforms that were meant to resemble that worn in concentration camps. And following the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and the reintegration of East Germany, neo-Nazi attacks were on the rise massively. But after discovering all of this, the German police were apprehensive to admit the racism that motivated this group or these murders, and they tried to blame these on immigrant communities instead. Families of the victims have since submitted a report to the United Nations accusing Bavarian police of racism, which is pretty undeniable, let's be honest. I don't know if they were reluctant to admit this because in fear of like the media catching wind of it, or just the fear of what was going on in Germany at this point in time, or whether they were just point blank being racist and just didn't want to give it the time of day. And there aren't too many details on exactly why they didn't want to admit it was racism. Why? Why aren't there the details out there? Why isn't there a statement? Why haven't they spoken about this since? And this is a really fascinating case because it really wasn't that long ago at all. And it wasn't until the 11th of July 2018 that Beate Japp was found guilty on counts of 10 murders, membership in a terror organisation, and arson, where she was sentenced to life imprisonment. And there we have it, guys. That was today's case, which had more twists and turns than you probably ever thought it would. I hope you liked that one. Kind of a bit of a trick. We kind of very lightly touched upon many murders. I tried to keep it like a storytelling venture. Who knows if I did a good job? I probably just confused you and absolutely offended multiple communities along the way with my terrible pronunciation. With all that being said, though, it is a truly horrific case that this neo-Nazi group were going around and murdering, and it's quite sad, really, that the police spent loads of money investing in a potential serial killer when actually quite obvious to everyone else that this was clearly a contamination issue. But what do we do from these things? We learn, and changes have been made since this case, which hopefully will prevent it from happening again. And I'm sure the German police don't want to look that silly again. So comment below what you thought of this. Could you keep up? Did you get completely lost? Did you give up? At what point did you give up, if you did? I'm going to start adding something new to see if you guys made it to the end of the video. So if you made it to the end of the video, comment a star emoji down below in the comments, and yeah, we'll see who made it. And if you see others, there you go, you made it too, you can be friends. As always, you can hit subscribe, hit the little heart in the bottom corner of the screen to make sure you never miss out on your weekly dose of true crime from me. Next week I have a huge episode planned that I'm really, really excited about, so make sure you subscribe, share, like, all of that good stuff to make sure you don't miss out on that. Also, comment below or feel free to message me on Instagram, TikTok, whatever, a case that you want me to cover. I have started to get some message requests, which is really cool, and I want to cover cases that you want to, hear about, so please do. Make sure you go do something good for yourself now. Make sure you drink your water, because you probably haven't done that, have you? So yeah, with all that being said, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I will catch you next time. Bye.